So I want to let you know that I'm the late Lynn Snodgrass, as in dying, but as in late from coming from another meeting. I'm the CEO of the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome all of you to our Business and Leaders Luncheon today. It's going to be really fun, and without our sponsors, our presenting sponsors, we couldn't do this. Normally we're in person and we get to rub elbows, not in the bumping kind, but in the eating together kind. But virtual is second best, and I'm grateful for our continued sponsorship. Our presenting sponsors, Columbia Bank, the Boeing Company, Portland General Electric, and also Gresham Barlow School District and MetroEast Community Media. We're grateful for all 5 of them. Thank you so much for being with us. We are not recording the webinar today. It says recording, so Asha, I think we need to stop that from happening.
Unless Adam is not okay with the recording the bulk of it, I had instructed Keith on when to stop the recording to make sure that the information that you requested was
okay. Thank you for that double check. Okay, so with Valentine's Day coming up, I'm sure all of you are thinking about diamonds for your significant other, right? Well, maybe not. I know my husband's not, but it is really, really exciting that we have this kind of a manufacturer, this quality, this international opportunity in our backyard on Stark Street. They moved in, they built, they're here for a long time. They're going to be great neighbors. So with us today is Adam O'Grady. He is the general manager of our local one-of-a-kind diamond company. He tells us that he's been very fortunate to have been in a diamond manufacturing his entire working life. Everyone loves diamonds, right? Is what he says. It has taken him, this industry has taken him all over the world, working in Ireland and South Africa, Sweden, China, and the United Kingdom, and over the last couple of years to the United States and right here in Gresham. Up until the last few years, he was mostly involved in diamond for the industrial applications. You know, they make diamonds for certain things in manufacturing, but now he's working exclusively in Lightbox Jewelry. He was the project manager responsible for the Gresham project from conception, site selection, and construction. And now he's the general manager for the new Element 6 and Lightbox Jewelry Lab, growing diamonds in the facility in Gresham. So with that in mind, Adam, I know you've got some things you want to tell us and share with us, and I've got a list of questions that some of our members had forwarded to us. So Adam, welcome to the Business and Leaders Luncheon. We're really grateful to have you here. So it's your turn.
Thanks very much for that kind introduction. I think we originally planned to do this was it May last year? And that was, again, how quickly time has passed. But it's nice to do it eventually, even if it is virtual. So yeah, I have a couple of slides, if Asha is going to share them. That I'll talk through, and Lynn was kind enough to provide me with some information in advance around what people might like to hear about and what people might like to know. So I've tried to focus a little bit on that. But I think firstly, just around about myself. So Lynn, you mentioned a few things. I'll maybe elaborate a little bit. Asha, if you want to click on. If we could move to the next slide, please. So as Linda said, I'm the general manager of the Element 6 Lightbox Jewelry facility in Gresham. I'm originally a chemical engineer by trade. I qualified in University College Dublin back in the early noughties. And I started to work with Element 6 in 2003 at our facility in Shannon, Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland. The company had recently rebranded to Element 6 from its previous name, which was DeBeers Industrial Diamond Division. And I've held a variety of positions with the company over the last 18 or 19 or so years. But I think most recently, I worked as our operations manager in our facility in Johannesburg. That was a high pressure, high temperature facility. So synthesizing diamond using the power and pressure that would be associated with their production nature. I then moved to China, spent a couple of years living just outside Shanghai, running our high pressure, high temperature facility there. And then I started to move into our CVD business that I'll elaborate on as we talk through today, but initially as general manager in our facility in the UK, sister facility, quite a small facility now compared to our facility here in Gresham. And then over the last 3 to 4 years, I've been leading up the project to, design a facility, select the site, construction, and then I've taken over as general manager. So I think from a sort of an interest perspective, and if people have questions, I think I can answer for the most part questions around why we came to Gresham, how we came here, the challenges we had. If I haven't covered it in the slides, please feel free to ask. Next slide, please. So I think it's useful maybe just to kick off to explain a little bit of relationship between Lightbox and Element 6. So the facility that we've built here in Gresham is owned by a company called Lightbox Jewelry. They're a part of the DeBeers Group, and the facility is 100% dedicated to producing laboratory-grown diamond, lab-grown diamond for their relatively new commercial business. The facility is operated by another DeBeers Group company, which is Element 6, Element 6 being carbon, the sixth element. And Element 6 has been a leader in the synthetic diamond market for roughly 70 years, going back to the 1950s. And Element 6 brings technical expertise, know-how, we bring our patents, we bring our equipment to the party, and we operate the facility on behalf of Lightbox. Thanks, Sasha. So if you then look at our ownership structure, so I think, if you start really, really big picture here, Element 6, Lightbox, and DeBeers, we're all part of the Anglo-American group of companies. Anglo-American's a mining company, and it's involved in a wide variety of mineral assets, from metallurgical coal, primarily in Australia, to platinum, gold in South Africa, obviously diamonds, and then nickel, copper, and other more trace elements in South America. So big mining company, $30 billion sort of annual turnover, 56 sites, 15 countries, 60 to 70,000 employees around the world. It's a listed company on the FTSE 100 in London. One of the assets that Anglo-American owns, one of the business units, is the DeBeers Group. Anglo-American has been a minority shareholder in DeBeers for much of the DeBeers Group's history, actually going back into the 20s and 30s. And the Oppenheimer family were the primary holders. And then a number of years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, Anglo-American purchased the majority share. So Anglo-American holds 85% of the DeBeers Group shares, and the balance of 15% are held by the Government of Botswana. And that's a partnership, joint venture arrangement with DeBeers, and it has been for a number of years. DeBeers, roughly 5 billion. I think we'll talk maybe a little bit more about some of the numbers and how they've changed. But if you go back to 2019, would have been about $5 billion dollars per year annual revenue. And whilst they're a mining company at their core, they would be involved, or we are involved, in operations from mining through to jewelry manufacture. We have a DeBeers Technologies division where we design equipment that's used in the diamond sorting industry, in the diamond analysis, diamond inspection industry, as well as jewelry itself, and some direct sales. So whilst the vast majority of the DeBeers revenue is from selling rough diamond, raw natural diamond, there is obviously forever mark and some direct to customer parts of the DeBeers Group as well. So very much involved in the full value chain, albeit that the vast bulk of the revenue is from just mining and rough sales. And then beneath that, you've got two companies that we're obviously a bit more familiar with here locally, and that's Lightbox Laboratory-Grown Diamond, which is at the moment 100% owned by the DeBeers Group. And it's a relatively new company, launched in 2018, based in the UK primarily in terms of the management offices and whatnot, although our main footprint manufacturing-wise is here in the US. And then Element 6, which by comparison to DeBeers Group is roughly $500 million 2019 sales, and roughly about 2,000 employees across our operations, primarily the UK, US, Ireland, South Africa, Germany, and China. Element 6 is in two parts. I don't want to get bogged down in the details, but the facility and the group that I work for is 100% owned by DeBeers. There is another section of Element 6, which is a joint venture with a Belgian materials company. Not really that important for the conversation today, but just to state the fact. So if we move on, please, again. So a little bit about Lightbox Jewelry. So fashion jewelry brand launched at JCK Las Vegas. For those in the jewelry and diamond world, certainly here in the UK or the US, JCK is a big magazine. It tends to be it's an industry magazine. It typically wouldn't be used by the end user, the consumer per se. It's an industry-based magazine, and it runs a very, very large jewelry and diamond conference in Vegas, usually in June, virtual again last year. But Lightbox Jewelry was launched at that in 2018. It created a serious splash in the industry at the time. Up until that point, De Beers had restrained from becoming involved in manufacturing lab-grown diamonds, or sometimes called synthetic diamond. One of the aspects of the Lightbox proposition at the time, which was very, very different to what was in the market, was a pricing structure which was intended to be as transparent and as simple and modest as possible. So to put it into perspective, you take a reasonably good quality 1 carat natural diamond, you could be in the sort of $4,000 to $5,000 range. Some lab-grown producers were producing synthetic diamond and selling roughly at a discount of about 30% to the natural price, so maybe in the $3,000 to $3,500 range. Lightbox is selling the same material, 1 carat stone, at $800 per carat. And it's a linear pricing structure, which is the other thing that's quite novel in the diamond industry, which is 1 carat is $800, half a carat is $400, quarter of a carat is $200. So that disproportionate pricing as the diamond stone gets better. If anybody has shopped for a diamond, they'll know a 2 carat diamond is not exactly twice the price of a 1 carat diamond. That inherent rareness that comes with natural diamonds that leads to this disproportionately more expensive price as you go larger just isn't the case with lab-grown diamond. A bigger stone takes twice as long to grow, ergo it takes twice as much to produce, and therefore the price to the customer is a simple 2x. The other really interesting aspect about lab-grown diamonds is the ability to offer white, obviously, but pink and blue stones at the same price as one would typically purchase a white stone. And again, if you're familiar with colored diamonds, apart from their inherent sort of prettiness, a good quality 1 to 1.5 carat pink stone is way beyond the ability for most people to purchase ever in their lifetime. You're into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So to be able to offer that sort of product and that color in pink and blue so far at the same $800 per carat price range is very, very novel in the market. So that's sort of who Lightbox is. Element 6 then, by comparison, part of the same group. We both work with diamond, but we're very, very different company in our background. So Element 6 produces 2 types of diamond. We produce diamond through high pressure, high temperature. So if you think of a hydraulic press and squeezing graphite until it synthesizes into diamond, similar to what would happen in the Earth's crust, a lot of pressure and temperature. Typically, Element 6 has made diamond that way for 60 to 70 years. Diamond is relatively cheap. It's not pretty material. It tends to be very much function over form. So, if you look at that image on the left-hand side of your screen, those little black discs that you can see on the top of that drill bit, they're polycrystalline diamonds, synthetic diamond produced by Element 6, and they're used for their hardness, toughness, ability for wear. So, this is an example. This is a drill bit that would be used in the oil and gas industry, but other examples of that same material being used for road planing. So, if you see at times when a road becomes so bad that people go and they strip up the top surface and they relay the road, they would typically be diamond bits or carbide bits that would be used to churn up the top surface of a road. Also in mining and cutting, whether it be granite cutting, whether it be polishing, I'm sure most people have a diamond polishing blade on a drill or something at home. So very much used for applications that rely upon diamond's strength, its toughness, its wear resistance, its durability. So all uses relying on strength. The second part of the Element 6 business is the... Sorry, I've got a call coming through. Let me just cancel. The second part of Element 6 business relies on our chemical vapor deposition technology, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But it relies upon producing really high quality diamond, which is used for non-abrasive processes. So it relies upon the diamond's optical transmission, relies upon diamond's thermal transition. So diamond is the best thermal conductor, so it transfers heat better than any other material on the planet. We use copper wiring, and diamond is a far superior conductor of heat. Looking at some of its acoustic parameters, so how, if you take a speaker tweeter dome, how well that diamond is able to hold its shape while moving at very, very high oscillations, gives you crispest of sound. So it relies a lot on the technologies business, which I'm part of, use very much reliant on diamond for these non-strength related properties. So going into applications like laser windows, tweeter domes, as you can see on the right hand side, and into thermal heat distribution. So if you think of electric applications where something overheating tends to be the main reason why something fails, diamond is much more superior than any other material at taking heat from a hot surface and being able to remove that quickly and spread it. So if you think about high power electrical equipment that's trying to get a lot of, whether it be voltage or current through very, very small devices, those devices tend to overheat, and diamond heat spreaders are used in those applications. So a lot of internet applications, defense applications, relying on diamond's thermal characteristics rather than just it being the strongest material. So Element 6 has been around, as I said, for about 70 years, and we're supplying into a huge range of different industries: oil and gas, as I said, road, mining, consumer electronics. So a lot of car parts, aerospace parts will be machined using diamond tools. And then, as I said, into the sort of higher tech part of the semiconductor business. And the facility we have here, we very much consider ourselves part of the semiconductor family of companies rather than the rest of Element 6 per se. So if I look at our process, this is a schematic of one of our CVD tools. And effectively, we have a substrate, as we refer to it. It's the sort of slightly pink disc that you see sitting in the bottom of the chamber there. And we would load our diamond substrates onto that. I think actually with hindsight, we did miss the video that I planned to show at the end of the previous slide. Maybe we could use that now, and then I can talk through this slightly afterwards, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, I can't count, Adam.
Yeah, I got into a role and I went.
At Lightbox, we use lab-grown diamonds to make our beautiful jewelry. They're chemically the same as natural diamonds and even just as hard. But behind that sparkle, there's a lot of real groundbreaking science. It all starts in the lab at Element 6. They've spent the last 30 years perfecting the process to grow the highest quality stones. Every time, we begin with tiny specks of high-quality lab-grown diamonds, kind of like seeds. Multiple seeds are placed in a vacuum chamber called a plasma reactor, and that's when things really start to heat up. No, seriously, the plasma reactor heats up to 6,000 degrees, approaching the temperature of the sun. Carbon atoms rain down on the seeds, growing the stones layer by layer. With this technology, it only takes 2 or 3 weeks, but the longer they sit, the bigger they get. When the stones are big enough, they're scanned and assessed by our experts to maximize the size and sparkle of each individual jewel. Then they're cut using precision lasers before they're polished to shine. Our experts play with time and chemistry to create lab-grown diamonds in dazzling colors, starting with soft blue and blush pink. Sounds simple, but the process has taken thousands of hours to perfect. Each and every stone is inspected over 70 times. It's how we make sure our stones are always the highest quality. If a stone is larger than 0.2 carat, it's inscribed with our tiny sign of quality. It's invisible to the naked eye, but detectable by a 10 times magnifying loupe. Once the finished stones are complete, they're set by specialist jewelers in the best silver and 10 karat gold. That's the science behind the sparkle of Lightbox lab-grown diamond jewelry.
Thanks. I think that explains our process as well as I could. I probably just to elaborate. We use a, I think we were on slide 6 or 7. So we use a set of process gases, primarily hydrogen and methane. So if you think of methane, chemically it's CH4, so 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens, and that's the carbon that we use to deposit on our diamond surface. So you enter a very small disc of diamond, and you move these gases into the chamber. You use microwave generated to heat them up to a couple of thousand degrees. They form a plasma in that chamber. Hydrogen activates the surface of the substrate, in this case a diamond seed. It creates areas where carbons can be deposited by removing the atoms on the surface, and then the diamond is built up atom by atom, layer by layer. And as it says in the video, you go longer, you leave it for longer, it gets bigger. It does get more challenging the bigger you go, but fundamentally it's a time to size calculation. Technology that we've built up over plenty of years, and we were really fortunate that when we moved to the area here, we were able to source another company. Not sure if they're in the chamber or not, but another company in the Gresham area who was able to actually manufacture this equipment for us. So that was quite a nice thing to be able to do. It made our lives a lot easier to be able to manufacture our reactors locally in the area, and obviously it's good for the local economy as well. Just moving on then. So there's some site-specific things that Lynn had called out as questions people may have interest in. So we move on to the next slide. So a couple of questions I'm always asked is, you could build this anywhere in the world. Why did you end up in Oregon, and why Gresham in particular? So we had decided relatively early in our site selection process, running back to the back end of 2016 and early 2017, that a North American location made a lot of sense for us. We primarily seen the product as being sold in the US, certainly initially. And for the first 2 years, we have only sold in the US and recently into Canada. And just before Christmas, we started to sell also in the UK. So it made sense to have a North American location with a North American cost base to ultimately, excuse me, sorry, some dogs here in the house, unfortunately, to have a cost base in dollars if we're selling in dollars. We worked through over the course of a couple of months, what the various options were for us in the US and in Canada. And we came to a short list, and that short list was roughly the Pacific Northwest, and we also thought of Quebec quite seriously. We did spend a lot of time in both Oregon and in Washington State working through available sites. And if you look at our criteria, it was very much available power. So we do consume 4 or 5 megawatts of power, which is significant. By comparison with some of the data centers that are springing up all over the place, consuming 30, 50, 100 megawatts, not that much, but 5 megawatts is also not insignificant, and therefore that being available to meet our time frame. And that was one thing that the site in Gresham here had, ready built infrastructure with capacity to be able to serve the plant. A lot of the areas in Washington in particular that we looked at required us to build a substation, which is by necessity, it's a sort of a 3 to 3.5 year project, whereas the factory was only going to take 2 years. So that was really important. And I think at the beginning, we were very focused on power cost. And as we came through the process, available power to meet our program and the quality of that power infrastructure became much more important. A reasonable power cost is a factor. As most of you know, industrial power here in the city of Gresham for users of scale is in the 6 to 6.5 cent per kilowatt hour. It's amongst the lowest in the country, but it's far from the lowest. But a good combination of a reasonable power cost with a reasonable renewable mix. The renewable mix here is in the 30 to 50% range, depending on how you qualify hydroelectric power. And states that have invested previously in renewable power tend to be able to hold a consistent price point for power into the future as well. So it gives you future confidence on price. Being close to a large metro area was important to us, both for talent, to be close to a local precision manufacturing community. We did manage to build most of our CBD reactors in Gresham. I think we could have gone to plenty of places in Cheatham County and places like this, and we'd struggle to find employees who are familiar in working in a highly precise manufacturing environment, reading technical drawings, following detailed work instructions. We'd also struggle to find companies who could help us with technical problems, remachine components, etc. So being in that area where we had that network of suppliers around us was really important. And then finally, obviously being able to get access to quality designers, contractors and builders. And, these things can be built anywhere in the world and anywhere in the country, but the closer you are to a large metro area, the more economically feasible it is. And then once we went through that process, we went through a lot of sites, as I said, a couple of states as well. And when we landed on the site in Gresham, it was pretty clear to us very quickly that the site was almost perfect. It was very close to shovel-ready. It was the right size. Substation was adjacent to the site. There was not a lot that was wrong with the site. And the folks at the port and at the city of Gresham were really, really helpful in terms of just understanding how we would go about building it, what the complexity would be. And it became pretty clear to us from the conversations we'd had in Gresham versus Hillsborough versus Vancouver versus Spokane, etc., that the process was going to be better managed here from the city's perspective. They certainly seem to be more business friendly, I guess, one, but they also appear to have put a lot more effort and thought into their permitting process to make it as business friendly as possible. And rather than requiring everything up front, they were very happy to work with us and say, give us a site plan, we'll approve that, you can get started, then come back with your building plan, they will review that. And they stuck to their 30-day sort of permitting process for the most part over the course of the process. So they did a great job, but I think it was clear from the very beginning that they were probably a cut above the other cities that we had looked at, and that was a sort of cherry on the pie when it came to the selection. So if we move on again. Staffing wise, at the moment we're running at just about 72 people on the site. I checked the numbers, I think they add up, but I changed one or two afterwards, so don't pull me up if I'm off somewhere. And we've probably about another 10 people or so to come in over the next month or two. Breakdown of that, we've about 4 pure managers on the site, myself, the operations manager, the engineering manager. We've got about 30 production technicians, and we've got roughly 15 or so between scientists and engineers, and they're a real mix of physicists. We've got 1 or 2 PhDs, and most of our engineers have a bachelor's, some have a master's, and we've got a real range in there as well, from mechanical, electrical, pure process engineers, as well as I said, health and safety, and lean manufacturing, so world-class manufacturing. So we've got a real mix of different scientists and engineers, and it's a good pool actually. Mostly from the area here. I think in total, if you were to look at the senior staff, we maybe 4 or 5 people moved to the Portland area as part of the recruitment process, but 90% of the staff were recruited locally. Outside of that, maybe 6 people or so working in admin, supply chain, office management, accounts, couple of security, 24/7 security for a site like ours, and then we've got about 13 at the moment, maintenance technicians and facilities technicians. So I think if you look at it overall, pretty clear from this that we're not making widgets. And it's not a high volume processing facility. It's pretty high indirect base and pretty high technical base as a proportion of the total staff. And we've got a relatively small number of direct hands-on people, but what we expect from them is to work to a highly precise way and a highly repetitive way, but it's not high volume work in that sense. So recruitment wise, look, we started about 2 years ago when we started getting boots on the ground here. I moved here in June 2019. I think the first real boots we had on the ground here were September 2018. So it's just around 2.5 years ago now at this point. We're very conscious from the beginning that we needed to have a good, attractive package to hire the right staff during the ramp and the commissioning stages. Obviously, we didn't want to target the lower end of the pay scale, and certainly not. It kind of makes no sense, investing so much money going to an area for the right talent and then trying to really target the very bottom end. But we were also very conscious that we didn't want to go right to the very top of the scale and get into bidding wars, et cetera, et cetera. But we were conscious holistically that we could focus on a more overall package and what that meant. We also started hiring people very, very early, in some cases, probably 6 or 8 months before we needed that person. We already were in the recruitment process. So we gave ourselves a lot of time and we put a lot more effort into personality and fit with the rest of the team rather than pure, do you have X qualification and then put them straight into recruitment process. So most office staff would have had 3, if not 4 interviews. And even on our production technician staff, it would have been 2, maybe 3 interviews in the early days. And even now, when we're much more mature, we're still going through 2 rounds of interviews for all positions. I think just some of the things we did talk about at the time, rather than remuneration per se, is we did leverage a relationship with ADP to provide our payroll, but also to provide us with part of their healthcare scheme that they offer. And I think they have like 300,000 people under their schemes across the US. So it gave us a lot more buying power and a better, more attractive scheme than we could normally have offered with 60, 70 heads on site only. So that was advantageous, certainly when we were competing with other high profile companies in the area and whatnot. Secondly, it became clear to us quite early that attracting staff to move to our company from existing employment, annual leave became a blocker for people. Moving jobs, going back to 10 or 12 days of annual leave per year was a problem for many people. So we made a decision quite early that rather than staff accruing leave with service, so after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years you get an extra day, that actually we applied that full 20 days of annual leave up front to all employees from the beginning. And secondly, we also agreed to provide it at the start of the year. So people don't accrue 1.6 days per year. They get their 20 days allocation on the 1st of January, and it gives us more control over how people consume it during the course of the year. It gives them a little bit more ownership on taking it proactively during the year. As well as the 7-day sick leave. We did talk a lot about bucketing them together, but we felt ultimately that we wanted to be generous on annual leave and not be generous on sick leave. And then finally, we did take the opportunity at the time, and it's not something that is broadly in place across Element 6, but we did, with a new facility, it was an opportunity to do things right, and we we outlined a 13-week parental leave fully paid by the company plan for all employees, regardless of gender, or whether it's a natural birth or whether it's an adoption. So we think it was really important to set that out from the beginning, that we would treat people equitably. Had we not done, it becomes very difficult to implement that sort of process after the event. And that's very much the challenge I think most companies have, and certainly the challenge that Element 6 has internationally is, in the UK, we offer six months for women and nothing for men. And it's very difficult to now change that without giving away or taking something back. So we felt it was important to set the bar at the right level from the beginning. For hourly staff, then we focused on a shift structure, which was a fixed structure. So we have a 4-shift system. Effectively, it's mornings, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 12-hour shift, 10 to 10, and then a night shift by comparison, and then the same later in the week. The feedback we had from people was that they preferred a fixed shift rather than a rotational shift. So, it's easier to plan your life if I'm always working Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 10 to 10, whether that be in the mornings or in the evenings, rather than having to worry about childcare and other things that happen in life when your shifts are always changing. We made it from 10 to 10 so that we always met all of the staff every day, no matter what. Your manager will see you between 7 and 10, or from 10 to 4 or 5 in the afternoon. We didn't like this shift structures of 7 to 7, where you might never see the night shift. So we're really conscious that we wanted to see people all of the time. And then on top of that, we guaranteed 6 hours of overtime per week to balance up the total number of hours. So it works out at 36 plus 6. We offer short interval control bonus, so a bonus for hourly staff up to 10%. So, we look at current performance, we put a stretch on top of that. If you crush it, 10% is available, then the target for next quarter goes up again. And similarly, if you miss it, the target comes down. So it's there to always provide some stretch. And then we started on an hourly rate locally of $18.50, which was probably 70% off, I would say. And we then, once we've completed the training period, which we think is about 3 to 6 months, we then offer a 10% increase. So a trained member of staff is, I think, $19.65, something like that, versus somebody who's just in the door, who's still during training. And then we're still building it, but we've put a lot of work into a skills-based pay model that offers another 3 tiers above those 2 levels that I mentioned. So based on somebody's cross-training on site, so how many different jobs they can do, completing Six Sigma training for both yellow and green belt, depending on which level you go through, and demonstrating some of those projects and shop floor based problem solving and minor process improvements. There are 3 further 10% increments available to production technicians. Not everyone can obviously go all the way to the top tier, but the expectation is that you have the bulk of people in tier 2, some people on training, and then you have a distribution sitting in tiers 3, 4, and 5. But it does mean that for a production technician, you can work almost up to $26, $27 an hour for our best people who are most trained. So put a lot of effort into it, and trying to make it a more holistic package rather than just chasing an individual hourly rate. I suppose just before we move on to COVID-19, like one thing that we did push really hard at the time was getting as diverse a workforce as we could. Backgrounds, all of that sort of thing. But primarily we were focused on a good gender balance on site. It's difficult in our industry, with science and technology, there tends to be less women coming through the university system. Certainly, if I look at my own university class, it was the exception. We probably had a 70-30 split. Most had 90-10. So it's challenging. But where we are at the moment is roughly in that 60-40 range, with, let's say, 40 men on site and 30 women, plus or minus. And we've done reasonably well at the management level as well, and probably 50-50 when you get into middle and senior management, which I think in our industry is really good and something we're proud of. So jumping into COVID-19 and how it's impacted us, I think just day-to-day stuff, I think as probably a lot of people suffered. We had a lot of absenteeism in March, April, May. I think a lot of people had a lot of fears and concerns at the time. I think some of them were very legitimate, and a lot of people took advantage of the situation, but very much veered on the safe side in those early couple of months. And if you look at our absenteeism rate, a lot worse between April and June, even though the instance of the virus was a lot lower than it is in the last 6 months. And the absentee rate is nowhere near as high as it was earlier. And the timing for us was kind of poor, with lots of new staff coming in. It's interesting, I believe that 65% of our staff joined us since March 16th, which was when the restrictions and the shutdowns started in the city here. So yeah, as I said, more than half of the staff have only worked with us during the COVID times rather than before then. So that's interesting, because we put a lot of effort into the team in the previous 12 to 18 months, building the right team spirit and lots of team activities. And then, as I said, most of the staff haven't experienced any of that. We've had some problems getting people on site to fix things and to help us with new equipment and whatnot, but I don't think that's uncommon in the industry. And we had major problems, I would say, moving raw materials in and out of the country, specifically with diamond products. A lot of the processing is done in India, and diamond is typically only transported on passenger jets rather than on DHL freight jets, and all those passenger jets stopped. So, we lost, I'd say, in the course of 2020, almost a quarter. Pretty much April, May and June were a wipeout due to not being able to move our product into the country. So otherwise, I'd say that the implications on the floor day to day have been that sort of instance rate of absenteeism. And we've put in probably the same sort of checks and balances that most people have. We've temperature screening for staff coming on site. We're encouraging people to isolate and to be honest if they think they've been exposed, and we're doing our best not to penalise them financially for doing so. But for every potential track and trace event, it's a test followed by 5 days, followed by a second test. So it's about an 8-day period from the time somebody is asked to stay off site to when they're coming back on. And if I look at it at the moment, at that 60 to 70 people, we've had 12, 13 people so far this year who have already either gone through that process or are in that process at the moment. So it's in that sort of 10 to 15% rate. So it has hurt. As I said, it's cost us about a quarter. But I think, for the most part, actually done pretty well over the period. So if we move on then, I think this is almost the last slide. So I did want to chat a little bit about how the COVID-19 has impacted on the wider businesses. So just firstly on the Element 6 industrial business. From pretty much the start of April, we started to see a drop in orders, probably to the tune of 10, 20%. And then probably the worst we've seen was in June, July, 50%. A lot of our businesses in Europe, a lot of European companies have a sort of July August shutdown, in particular in Germany, Sweden. So we did see a sort of a double hit across the summer months. And then a pretty steady, gradual improvement in the numbers over the second half of the year. Haven't seen a fully totaled annual revenue number for 2020 yet, but my sense is it's in that sort of 70% range, which is probably better than most, I think, in the circumstances. If I look at Lightbox specifically, very new business, obviously trying to launch commercially even though this is a relatively modestly priced jewelry product, $800 is not nothing, but it's also not $10,000-$15,000. Jewelry and that section of the market has probably been hit worse than most, certainly in the second quarter and the third quarter, although there was a rebound coming into the fourth quarter with the holiday season and everything else. Lightbox have seen an improvement and pretty comfortable where they are at the moment. Put it in perspective, I talked earlier about DeBeers being, roughly $5 billion. The 2019 numbers, 2020 numbers are not even half of that, in the 2.5 billion. So that's a massive shock to the system. And DeBeers went through a serious round of restructuring over the course of last summer to right-size the business based on what had happened during the course of the year. So the impacts have been very different for Element 6, the DeBeers and Lightbox, but all have been impacted probably the same as everybody in this call has been, with drops of anywhere from 30 to 60 to 70%. That was what I had for the presentation. So I'm happy to field any questions, try to answer them if I can. Over to you then.
Adam, that was amazing. I saw at least 6 samples of jewelry settings that I'd like to have. If you could send me how to order for them, I'd love to do that. A couple of things that you said, 6,000 degrees, that's what it takes that much heat to do this?
Yeah, it's certainly hot inside. Look, it's a bit misleading because obviously at vacuum, achieving those sort of temperatures is much easier than at room temperature. But yeah, it's a couple of thousand degrees. Yeah.
So does an untrained eye or a trained eye, can they tell the difference between a manufactured diamond and a mined diamond? So even a trained eye, presented with 2 stones side by side, wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Wow.
Typically, telling the difference requires a piece of equipment called Diamond View, actually, made by DeBeers Technologies, plug. But diamond sorting houses and jewelry houses would have that sort of equipment that would screen all incoming material to confirm whether it's natural or lab grown. So not everybody is. There are some unscrupulous types out there who would try and manufacture one and sell it as the other. So there's typically lots of controls in the pipeline to manage that. But yeah, visually, to the eye, they would look very much the same. As I think it was said in one of the videos there, the material that we produce over 25 points, so 0.25 of a carat, 0.2 of a carat actually. There's a laser inscribed mark. It's quite interesting. The laser inscription is after the stone has been produced, but it actually inscribes the mark about 200 microns below the surface of the stone, so you can't feel it on the top surface. But when you look with the 10x loop, you can see it to the eye. So that's quite interesting.
So Adam, does Lightbox on Stark Street, do they actually put the diamond in a setting, or do you just manufacture the diamond? Where do the settings come into play?
Sure. So we manufacture the raw stones. I think in the video you've seen Laura holding these relatively dark grey, brown, black sort of stones that don't really look like diamonds. So we manufacture that. We do a certain amount of cutting and polishing in Gresham, but it's very much for our process control reasons. Just cannot wait for the material to go to a third party to be cut and polished to find out how good or bad it was. So we polish about 1%, I would say, of what we manufacture. The vast bulk then gets cut and polished by a third party. And no surprise, that third party is in India. And jewelry manufacture then happens at a number of different vendors in India and beyond.
So we've been fortunate in the chamber to be able to go into companies that typically are very high privacy kind of companies, like the Boeing company and FedEx. Do you do tours? I know that when we go into FedEx, we have to do all kinds of things in order to get in. We can't have cameras and all that kind of thing. But the excitement of being in a facility that is so automated, that is so unusual, is always, it's fun for our Leadership Academy and others. So do you do tours? And if so, what's the criteria, or how do we get to that point so that we can?
Yeah, it's a good question. At the moment, obviously, no, we don't do any tours right now. But look, the intent is to be open amongst the local community. So I think when the time is right and it's safe to have people into the facility, we're more than open to doing that. The usual provisos, of course, around cameras and the like. But assuming we tick those basic boxes, we're more than happy to give a tour.
Mm-hmm. On a personal level, what have you found personally as a high level of satisfaction for being part of the community? Do you live in the Gresham area? Do you shop here? I mean, what from a personal level? Obviously, you have an accent, so you're not here originally. But from a personal level, what have you found comforting or enjoyable about our area?
So yeah, like I'm from Ireland. I'm a dual Irish-British citizen, and I'm here about just coming up to about a year and a half at this stage, and it's just been a very weird year and a half in that sense. You know, it's not the best time to move countries. And myself and my wife moved here about 18 months ago. So look, I've found it very, very easy. I found the people, you know, for the most part, there's always a few, but for the most part, very, very friendly, very helpful. I think the city made our lives so much easier, whether it was during the construction or even just personally, you know, needing help or needing advice. The relocation company that we used here, you know, they've gone way beyond the original scope of the contract, just in terms of reaching out and keeping in touch and all of that sort of stuff. So it's been a very, very easy move to have made. Like locally in the Gresham area, again, I think like we haven't had anywhere near the amount of visitors to the site as we would have expected normally. So we probably would have expected to do a lot more local restaurants, local things like that, and staff dinners and visitor dinners and things, and we just haven't been able to use as much. But just like more broadly, if we think about the day-to-day things that we need on site, you know, getting goods, materials in and out, access to local companies when we need help and assistance, you know, it's been very, very easy to find good quality suppliers and contractors.
Yeah.
To meet whatever we've needed. Actually, it's been easy, and you know, it seems obvious at this stage to say it, but you know, when we were in, you know, Moses Lake, you know, and you're looking around and you're thinking to yourself, could I make this work? And one of the things that hits you is, you know, every time you need something, it's going to be a challenge, and we haven't found that in the local area at all.
Well, one of the companies that helped you land here was Portland General Electric, because of the facility, the availability of power that they had, and they happen to be a sponsor of today's event. So, you already have had a long relationship with them. Asha, who, by the way, has done an amazing job balancing all of the presentation today. Asha, do we have any questions that we could pass on to Adam? We've got about 3 more minutes, and we're going to wrap it up.
We do. Jim Hathaway, we answered one of them. Somebody asked for your contact information, which I don't feel comfortable providing. I think that's Adam's choice. Jim Hathaway would like to know, how does a laser cut through a diamond? Laser is light, and wouldn't it just pass right through?
Not a laser expert by any means, but it has to do with the sort of wavelengths involved, and you're right, you know, it can pass through, and the trick that Lightbox uses with the inscription that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that inscription is made after the diamond is polished, but the inscription is actually below the surface of the diamond, and it effectively uses what you've said. It uses the ability of the laser to pass through the diamond, but only so far to then make the inscription below the surface. For some of our more robust cutting, so cutting the stone in half, for example, we typically use things like water-based lasers, so water jet lasers. So you use the laser beam down through the water beam itself to provide a focus point and cooling at the same time. But it all comes down to wavelengths and the type of laser that you use.
That's all.
And the diamonds are more transparent. That's not the same as being. There are interfaces and different growth patterns within the stone. So if you think of the individual seeds growing against each other and competing, it's not one completely homogeneous structure. So there are interfaces. Again, I think if you were to come on site, you know, we have a lot of laser technology on site, and we do some really cool stuff, and we'd be very interested to show you that.
This whole thing has been fascinating to me. In the garden center business, we buy plants from growers. They have little tiny cuttings that they put in 2-inch containers, and they lay thousands of them out. We watch them grow. So I'm fascinated by the whole manufacturing growing aspect of it, but I can't imagine doing that with a tweezer and putting it in a tiny little. It's amazing. Adam,
we have a robot that does that actually, but for the videos we use a tweezer. But yeah, it is interesting. Like with the main raw material that we use, apart from the gas, is diamond. So we recycle a certain amount of our material to make more of these plates, which we then grow the next generation from. Yeah,
that's amazing. Adam, we asked you to speak today. You just gave us an hour of your time, but that doesn't mean that an hour is all you put into it. I know from doing presentations that we spend much more time ahead of time. I want to thank you for all those minutes and hours that you put together this presentation for us today. You delivered your company's credibility very well. Thank you so much. And I can't wait till we are out of COVID and into your plant at a tour. I wish you well. I was fascinated by all of the hoops that you had to jump through, the lack of product being able to be delivered, the international visitors not being able to come. I mean, I had no idea the complications that your particular industry had. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I also hope that you and your wife get to be out and dine at some of our restaurants soon, but that will take a move bigger than I'm capable of doing personally. So again, thank you, Adam, for today. Thank you, Asha, for coordinating it. And thank you to our sponsors, Columbia Bank, Portland General Electric, who is powering Element 6 and the Lightbox, the Boeing Company, who is flying diamonds all over the place, Gresham Barlow School District, and MetroEast Community Media. I want to let everybody know that next month at our Business and Leaders Luncheon, we're going to have Dr. Pereira, the superintendent of Portland Gresham Barlow School System. Topic, are the schools opening? What's the bond completion? She's also on OSAA as a board member, so that's the sports world in youth for our state. So watch the newsletter for the details as they continue to be confirmed, because we've got another great Business and Leaders Luncheon planned for you in February. Adam, again, thank you very much. And to all of you that gave up an hour and a half of your time today, thank you for participating. We'll see you again. Bye.
Thanks, Sasha. Bye-bye.
Thanks to you both.